All right, now, yo, you spit it out, and I'll rhyme about it.
Energy moves all the world now.
We take it for granted.
Because we wake up and we just assume it's still there.
The world runs on energy.
I think most people can't even imagine what it feels like to not have energy.
The energy dilemma? What do you mean? You gotta go into that more.
Energy is the source that enables everything else in human life.
How do we move towards better and better and better energy?
The conflict between the developing and the developed world.
The politicians are making choices and the engineers aren't.
Economic issues associated with energy, the environmental issues.
Quality of life, life expectancy, technological and social advancement.
The key energy problem facing every country in this world is climate.
Nothing happens without power.
To me, the energy dilemma is that we don't appreciate energy enough.
In so many ways, it's easy to forget that energy even exists. And yet, like so many things in life, we only realize we've taken energy for granted and it all goes away. Because if you've ever been through a blackout, even a short one, then you know that when the power goes out, everything stops. Everything. The grid is the central nervous system of our country, connecting us all together, from the mountains to the plains, to the big cities, coast to coast. Everywhere, all the time, everyone is seeking power, and we are all paralyzed without it.
People don't understand how many ways we rely on energy and electricity.
We all drive places, we all fly places, we all use product that has come out of energy.
Electricity doesn't move like almost anything you're familiar with. You put it into a system, and it goes to where there's least resistance in the system. So if there is a lot of electricity going west, electricity will go east. And if there's a lot of electricity going west and east, it will go north and south. So when you turn your light switch on, where does that electricity come from?
On average, 20% of the grid is renewables, 20% is nuclear, 40% is natural gas, and 20% is still coal.
The electricity grid is the single most important network in the world. Like the rest of energy, it's the enabler of everything else we do.
When I turn that light on, the grid as a whole has to be in perfect balance all the time. I turn on a light, and some power plant makes a little bit more power. I turn the light off, some power plant makes a little less power. It's completely in balance all the time.
They don't actually understand what the lines, the wires, the power plants, they don't understand what it is. So this profusion of very smart, fancy people not understanding the grid, who are talking about the grid, you get a truckload of bullshit.
Cuando se va la luz, me siento bien frustrada, ya que tengo 3 menores de edad. Manejar la situación, prender velas, recargar lo que se pueda solar para entonces poder manejarlos a ellos durante la noche, pero es bien frustrante.
All over the world, blackouts are part of the cultural fabric. Here in Puerto Rico, the aging grid system of the island is increasingly prone to failures and outages. Here, we can see a glimpse of the challenges of energy poverty, a challenge that is even more profound throughout the developing world, where billions of people still live in a setting where the lights not turning on is their normal, not the exception.
You've got about 40% of the world's population who lives a lifestyle that an average Western person can't even conceive.
We currently have 759 million people
across the world who don't have access to energy, predominantly in Africa and South Asia. For someone who is yet to eat today, he's not thinking about what will happen in 30 days. He's thinking about what will happen to him in the next 5 minutes.
We still have a third of humanity, 2.5 billion people, that cook their daily meals burning wood, dung, and agricultural waste. Just the indoor air pollution from that kills 3 million people a year.
How is Africa supposed to develop in the context of a world that is trying to move away from those fuels that have enabled industrialization in the past?
I think it's a new kind of a colonial attitude that the people in India or in Nigeria should be using renewables without fossil backup because that will make them noble. No, they don't want to be noble. They want to be well-fed, well-housed, well-clothed.
Most of the Native American reservations have little or no electricity still, and how that can be is just unconscionable.
And we have a generator, and we buy some like gas to run that generator.
I can use the energy for just probably like 3 to 4 hours, and that'll be it. I want more energy because I want my vegetables and my meat and everything to be fresh. During the daytime, if we want to watch TV, we can't watch it on the evening time. And we watch it in the evening, we have to wait for the solar to get charged all day.
Wherever you live, fossil fuels remain the backbone of our energy system. It's how the lights turn on, cars run, planes fly, and factories stay open. Whatever your position on fossil fuels may be, our current reliance on them throughout every facet of our lives is indisputable.
50 years ago, we had a fair amount of oil being used, we call residual oil, dirty oil, and we got off of that for a variety of reasons, including cost. We had some coal, not a lot of coal, we had some coal, and we got off of coal. Now, if you're gonna get off of oil and you're gonna get off of coal, you're probably gonna have to go to something in the short term, and we went to natural gas.
When you take solid coal or liquid petroleum or gaseous natural gas, all carbon-based fuels, and you oxidize them, you burn them and add oxygen, you're gonna get a lot of energy. And we built a whole country.
You need a reliable source of energy you can actually push that power, and that's coal, and we are the beginning of the line right here.
Please look around yourself and identify one product which is 100% not derived from the oil and gas industry.
The world consumes 100 million barrels a day of crude oil, 100 million barrels a day. Without crude, you can't move things across the ocean, you can't drive trucks, you can't fly airplanes, you can't create plastics. Like, oil is embedded in the economy.
Try to make up your mind, can I live without oil and gas?
By adding carbon dioxide to the atmosphere, we're trapping heat on the planet. When you trap heat, you intensify the water cycle. The wets get wetter, the dries get drier. We're seeing that all over. Extreme weather gets more extreme. Whichever part of the United States or the world that you live in, we're seeing extreme weather that, I mean, just repeatedly is described as hellacious.
We've increased CO2 in the atmosphere by 50%. It absorbs infrared radiation, contributing to a slow warming of the planet.
We have to act now, we have to act now, but we have hundreds of years to adapt, and the water is not coming up 80 feet next week.
We are faced with a civilization-ending crisis. I mean, I don't think that's overstating it at all.
I got a good answer. Shut the plants down today. Shut them down. See what happens. If the world's gonna end, by God, let's get her stopped.
Climate change is actually real. The problem is, we are not fighting it together. We are fighting it from an ideological standpoint.
There are only a few issues that should concern our society as much as climate change. The debate rages everywhere and is a global challenge that requires global cooperation. Now, one of the defining elements of this debate is our energy transition and the shift away from fossil fuels towards cleaner sources of energy.
The sun is constantly outputting enough energy to fuel our entire earthly civilization many times over every day. The question is, how do we capture that energy and transport it?
Solar and wind are going to require 15 to 16 times as much raw materials in order to create the same amount of energy.
Will renewables make electricity more expensive? Over the last 10 years, starting 2010, 2020, the cost of delivering solar energy in the United States has dropped about 85%. At the end of the day, economics is going to win.
It's not just about CO2. It's not just about emissions. It's about the ability for capital providers to make outsized rates of return and create the next billionaire. That's really what this energy transition is about.
Nothing doesn't have an impact. I always hear that wind and solar are zero carbon. The blades of a wind turbine are made out of oil and gas. There is 100 tons of coal in the tower. That's what steel is, iron and carbon.
People say there's no silver bullet in energy, and they are almost right. Nuclear is as close as we could get in this world to a silver bullet.
I do support the use of nuclear as a low-carbon energy source. It can provide a very stable and efficient source of baseload energy.
There's just one problem. Although the physics is friendly, the policy is hard.
Geothermal energy, where you're using heat from the earth to generate electricity, we'd have 24/7 baseload power that could be ramped up and down at will.
It's a fascinating thought that we could have a little power station underneath us at all times.
Have you ever thought about what the future of energy will look like? How are we going to power the clean world of tomorrow? Can we ensure a future of plenty for the entire world's population? And critically, what are the technologies that will enable that change?
We're going to need other technologies. So hydrogen's one possibility.
For long-term storage, hydrogen with fuel cells is becoming up to snuff as something you can use.
I think we can make enough green biofuels right now to fly a flight from here to London. But I don't think we can make enough green biofuels right now for every airline that's flying in the world.
To back up one coal plant would take about the entire lithium mining of the Earth for about 6 months to a year. So how are you going to back up all these grids with lithium batteries?
Cobalt, lithium, copper, magnets, all the things that are required to build solar panels, to build wind turbines, to build electric vehicles. I've heard people refer to the energy transition as not a transition from fossil fuels to renewables, but it's really a transition from fossil fuels to minerals.
Look around. Electric vehicles are growing in popularity. There's a lot to like about them. Amazing acceleration, intuitive software, sleek design, fewer emissions. When I drive one, I feel like I'm riding into the future. From manufacturing to consumer demand, the acceleration in the industry is almost as fast as the cars themselves. Yet to bring EVs into every household will be a huge challenge. The grid is not designed with the capacity for tens of millions of vehicles to be charging all at once. And where does all that electricity come from? So are we pushing an EV future too quickly without fully understanding all the repercussions?
What are you plugging that car into right now? Primarily coal plants, some natural gas plants, some renewables.
Even taking into account the production of the batteries and the mining of the rare earths, it reduces carbon dioxide emissions, even if you were in a place where all the electricity is generated from coal.
We would have to degrowth, which would reduce CO2, reduce consumption, reduce profit, simplify life, reduce population. It's not a bad thing, but it's really bad for Tesla stock. Love you, Elon.
What's happening with energy transition right now is like, what was going on with the web and the internet in, late 1980s and early 1990s, no doubt.
In the 1980s, there was a mania then that we were running out of energy, oil and gas, and minerals and farmland and everything. And the most promising thing to me at the time looked to be fusion energy. It's what powers all the stars. It's the source of 99.99% of all the energy in the universe. So now where are the technologies that are gonna get young people excited? new energy. That what's going on in nuclear energy, how to make small modular plants that you can just bury underground. They work for 100 years and then you just leave them there and they're self-contained and whatever. That is an incredibly low impact way to build energy. We're gonna get a number of young people that are passionate that are gonna go after that.
With CO2 utilization, you could use that CO2 as a feedstock, turn it into something valuable that you could sell. Turn it into ethylene. You could then turn that into all kind of carbon negative polymers and plastics. We need to, on one hand, reduce our emissions, and then on the other hand, actively take CO2 out, which brings us to carbon negative technologies and, direct air capture.
And when people say, oh, we'll just capture the carbon dioxide and, push it underground. Well, you're trying to it's like making water go straight uphill. You can do it, you can only do it at a small scale at an extremely high price.
So as far as haters, I'll have the same policy as Nicki Minaj. You kind of ignore them. At some point, maybe you kind of, fight back a little bit. But at the end of the day, I think if you're doing something that's important, you are definitely going to attract some negative attention.
Whichever side of the aisle you're on, it doesn't really matter. Is we can remove carbon, we can store it in the earth where it came from.
If you really wanted to impact climate change, how about we only deliver Amazon on Mondays? Amazon would never reduce their deliveries. And so the real challenge is consumption is the problem, but we want to point at the boogeyman, which right now is fossil fuel companies, saying, you guys are making us burn things.
There are a number of transitions from one fuel to another fuel, but they've all taken 50 to 100 years. Here we're going to try to do this in 30 years with a population that is much larger and an economy that is much bigger.
Energy, poverty, and climate change. It's the intersection of these three issues.
We don't communicate that well. We have work to do on learning how to talk about energy as a world issue.
Regardless of where you are on the spectrum, I think we need to have the conversation around what is the role of energy in our lives?
The goal of this series, The Energy Dilemma, is to bring perspectives from across the energy world around the figurative roundtable to help us all come to our own unique conclusions.
The infrastructure is not there, but the technology is there.
I know the ice caps are melting and the sea level's rising. Like how long are we going to be out of power?
Think of this as a forum for a discussion on energy, one that celebrates a diversity of opinions, builds constructive dialogue, and seeks to identify proactive solutions. My name is Bill Butler. I can't wait to travel through the fascinating world of energy with you. Join me as we explore the energy dilemma.